Awaken Beauties, finally, it's here. The truth to empower women to true inner beauty through a healthy mind and inner biology. I am your hostess, Cassandra Keel, a 20-year salon owner, organic beauty product formulator, positive mind management, and clinical hypnotherapist. And I am here to help you stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back. Sponsored by evoquebeauty.com. evoquebeauty.com. Now, let's get to it. Welcome to the Awaken Beauty podcast. This is Cassandra, your clinical hypnotherapist, biofeedback practitioner, and neuroenergetic ADHD coach. And I'm telling you, my friends, I am beyond excited to welcome you into this very sensitive topic today. And it's going to be intense, but no pun intended. So I've got a few questions to warm up today's episode. And more times than not, do you easily feel overwhelmed by strong sensory inputs like smells, the way fabrics feel on your body, and sounds you easily pick up? Or do you seem to be aware of subtleties in your environment that others don't? Or do other people's moods affect you to the tune of little do they know you can read their energy like an open book? And lastly, are you or someone you know diagnosed with ADHD, autism, or other spectrums of a neurodiverse mind? Now, if you said yes to any of these, you might be a highly sensitive person, but there's more to the story. And after I connected the dots of my late adult ADHD tendencies, there's a common highly sensitive energetic nuance that threads through so many high-powered and successful individuals that have a neurodiverse mind. For me, ADHD, which can be a superpower or your kryptonite. So here today, we're going to talk about HSP. And so what is a highly sensitive person? And the term is coined by the clinical psychologist Elaine Aron in 1991 to describe a personality trait that is present in 30% of the population, approximately 80 million women and men across the US. And HSP refers to those with a sensitive nervous system and an increased awareness of physical, emotional, and social stimuli in their environment. But today, my friends, we're going beyond just HSPs. And research is finally taking notice to the energetic body. And our guest today is an absolute expert. So with that said, I hope that Judy and I can extend positive emotions of understanding, hope, and clarity about yourself or someone you know. Now, a little bit about Judy. Judy Lipson is a licensed professional counselor and former special educator who began her private practice, Spiral Wisdom, in 2002 to work with kids and adults of all ages who are sensitives, which means highly attuned to the five senses. Now, she's a writer, speaker, clinician, and educational consultant who teaches about metaphysics, transformation, and how to engage the gifts of being a sensitive while minimizing the challenges that so many experience in a lifetime. Now, Judy and I had done a previous episode, but our internet was not that cordial for us. And I'm so happy to have her back. This woman is a wealth of information and is starting to transition her career into really, truly educating. So Judy, welcome to the Awaken Beauty podcast.
Thank you, Cassandra. It's wonderful to be here, and hopefully it's going to work this time all the way through.
Yes, the metaphysics are clean and clear. So, Judy, I had shared prior that I was Googling on the internet, and I knew that there was something that really connected to my hypnotherapy training. And, my hypnotherapist instructor, or whatever you want to call him, brilliant mind, he really said, there's really no such thing as ADHD. And I really have always sat on that 50-50 line because the more and deeper I get into this neurodiverse mind and my research and all of this, I understand that there's a cognitive piece here that is genetic. But at the same time, I'm really not a person as of labels. Don't believe in labels. And so there's something so beautiful that when I came to your website, and everybody, we will absolutely share the show notes. She has a website that has newsletters going all the way back in history. And when I started reading, I not only saw the reflection of myself, but I had such a compassion for these children that she helps and touches and now is educating. So, Judy, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, what an HSP is, what a highly sensitive person is, and really what kind of got you moving in this direction with your professional career.
Thank you. And I agree with you in so many areas. One of the things that I don't want to forget to mention is your questioning of, is there truly this ADHD label? And I don't know. I don't know enough about neurology. I don't know how it's defined in individuals other than a lot of times questionnaires of the teachers, the family members, the person themselves. And so I'm not in a position where I can say it doesn't exist. What I do is when folks call me and I'm consulting, is I'll ask them, let's look at what may be creating these issues that look like ADHD. So we want to look at those things that as a special educator, I was taught, we look for the antecedents. What are those behaviors that came first? What were those situations and incidents that came first that created this, whatever it is? And so that's what I really encourage folks to look at, either whether I'm talking to the parents or I'm talking to the individual or the adult. And it starts to come down to, for me, it comes down to what are we seeing in that neurodiverse way, neurologically, in regards to sensitivities. And so I invite people to take a look at, are you highly attuned visually, auditorily, where you hear things that other people don't hear, or you're bothered by sounds that other people don't even seem to mind? How about fragrances and smells? How about the tactile? And we knew and know so much about tactile sensitivities from the autism population,
Right.
but there's so much more than just folks who are on the spectrum. So I started to coin this idea of sensitives. I don't remember if I saw Elaine Aron's work beforehand, or maybe I had and it triggered a thought in the back of my mind. So all of a sudden it just sort of coalesced and I grabbed a word that's very similar to hers. So I look at this continuum of sensitives, and I'm a pretty strong believer that all autistics are sensitives, but not all sensitives are necessarily on the spectrum.
I really love how you separated that. And, I think we have to be really careful about, again, going back to the labeling I haven't really thought of that, is that so many of the neurodiverse subtypes are sensitives based on our wiring and our nervous system, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a HSP or an empath or a highly sensitive person is neurodiverse. I think that's really interesting how the bidirectional piece there is, they're not corollary.
And yet I'm starting to think that if neurodiverse is an equivalent term for autism, then I agree with you. But if neurodiverse just means that people's neurological systems are different than what we call the neurotypicals, which again is sort of autism versus neurotypicals. Neurodiverse for me is again a more expansive term that I think might include sensitives, highly sensitive people. And it behooves us to take a look at what are the sensitive areas, what are the sensory things that are going on, what are the neurological strength, that's not strengths, that comes out wrong. What are the things that tap into the neurological system so strongly. So like even back when I started talking about the five senses, then I would always just kind of as a throw out thing, because it's not my area. And I'm talking to a bunch of parents typically at that point, especially. And I would say, okay, so if we're highly attuned to one or more of the five senses, doesn't it also make sense that we might be highly attuned or highly sensitive to the foods, the chemicals in our environment, medications, all these things, which again, then, Cassandra, I see as a neurodiverse wiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I also think, going back to the wirings, we have all different wirings. And this is also interesting work. And I know you've done some research with trauma. And, we definitely can say trauma informed is becoming a very widely used term, but it's very diverse even in saying that. So we understand that we have the polyvagal nervous system. We understand that 80%, they say 85% of all of that interaction is bidirectional from the organs to the brain, where only 15% is from the brain to the organs. So, follow me here, but if we have a neurodiverse spectrum, and then we also have the autonomic nervous system having this communication, right? So the 80% is really coming from the energetic field and the input to the person's waveform, and that's causing that spiral of a hyper state in the body. And especially for children, we kind of discussed last time that when the body is so overwhelmed, specifically when a child, or think about a baby, they've done studies where a baby will literally can die if it has too much electric stimulation and has so much trauma to its system that it literally shuts down. And so, when you speak about these children, and even going to something about having a tantrum, or is it a meltdown? Can you speak a little bit about what literally is happening in the nervous system that's triggering the brain that literally shuts all these cortical systems down, that parents and educators can be a little bit more aware of with a neurodiverse or HSP child, or even adult for that matter?
Yeah, that's one of the huge pieces that I try and teach to professionals and parents more and more and more, because we tend to view behaviors that aren't in keeping with what we're expecting or what we want as tantrums. Look at that child. How come they're not listening? How come they're being difficult? How come they're making my life miserable? And my point is that I don't believe any child wakes up in the morning with the intention of making somebody's life miserable. But when one is bombarded 24/7, and I read somewhere, Cassandra, you may have seen this too, that there's even question as to when the individual is sleeping, if the sensory input stops. And it would make sense from an amygdala standpoint, where the amygdala is that fight and flight, am I safe area inside the brain, that the amygdala has to be on call, has to be on alert, because that's its job. Am I safe? Period. End of story.
Right.
It's taking in information in nanoseconds. So it would stand to reason that the individual doesn't get rest even when they're sleeping.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Yeah, wow. And you think about just your environment, right? So we talk about all these different aspects of self-care, just your sleeping environment. And if that child is in such a stressful home, they never really get that restful sleep, which impacts the rest of their life. I know for me, I grew up in a family that, my brothers came home really late at night. I started taking Tylenol PM when I was young in high school, just so I can shut down my brain. But my hyper awareness, my consciousness was still at a state where I was still hyper vigilant. And I think that's more now than ever than today. And so I really love that you pointed that out, is that amygdala is still hyper aware.
So I want to talk a bit about tantrums versus meltdowns and trauma, because, and I'll kind of weave them through.
Love it.
I began to realize that with all the sensory input, and at a trauma conference, and he was talking about what happens physiologically in the body, and I began to realize that what he was describing for what I now call the big T traumas, rape, war, assault, car accident, these are big traumatic events. But isn't it true that we also are dealing with little T traumas when we are being bombarded with the five senses all day long? And even if we have a healthy family that's not dysfunctional, we still have all of these five senses bombarding the individual because the individual is so neurologically highly sensitive. Go back to that word. Just the frequency is so strong for them. So I try and help people to realize that we're not typically dealing with tantrums. I'm almost wondering if we may never be dealing with tantrums, but we're dealing with meltdown, which means it's neurological, and the being just can't take anymore. And it may look like a tantrum because it may be that the child or the older individual breaks down or shuts down when they say, I want a cookie, I want another cookie. And we say, no, we're about to eat, you can't have another cookie. I want another cookie. And it sounds like a tantrum, but what's really happening is they've been in school all day. They've not been wearing comfortable clothes. They've had to wear shoes. They have socks with seams. They've been smelling the odors from the cafeteria. They've been feeling the emotions and the energies of all the other children and staff people at the school all day long. And now it's 5:30, 6 o'clock, and the child can't have a cookie. It's not about the cookie. It's about, this is my little visual that I always use. It's about they've taken in as much as they can take in, and it overflows. So the trick is recognize the antecedents. How can we cut back on all of those inputs that are happening all day long? Where can we? How can we level the playing field? And then also teach these individuals physiologically. It's not enough. It's important, but it's not enough to just talk about mindfulness, which is part of the physiologic. But it's not enough to just talk about what are you thinking about, and let's address with cognitive behavioral therapy, which is important, but what are we doing with the body?
Yes.
You said something earlier on about, what was it, 85% or 80% comes from the organs to the brain as opposed to the brain to the organs.
Exactly. Yeah, it's such a huge thing. And I think we really undermined, and I'm so thankful that we're really starting now to have that. It's kind of always how this works. It's kind of like quantum is quantum, and then our human brains always have to go and try to like put all the papers to it to try to make sense of it. But we intuitively know to coexist, and that humans, our nervous system is really made, like you and I here together, I can see you, we're co-regulating together. And kids with stressed adults, or I was thinking about being an HSP or neurodiverse, the frequency in the brain, and this is how I explain it, is that there's many different dynamics going on, is that the frequency in the brain, so let's just like the brain is connected to the body, but my nervous system and my intuition can pick up everything. It picks up the sensory, it picks up the waveforms, it picks up what people's thought field is going on. And so all of that is creating a react or come an impact into my body, which then signifies my brain, which then turns into the action or the words that we say or what have you. So that's why I love your tantrum and meltdown explanation. And in your recent newsletter, you talked about this with trauma and how you really, it really flipped you when you went to these trauma seminars and heard, maybe we shouldn't be asking the person, or telling them to stop it versus really slowing down and co-regulating with them and becoming very conscious with them calming your own nervous system down and asking the question, what happened to you?
I was just trying to remember that line from
right?
Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah. Yes.
Exactly. What happened to this individual? Right. It's an inquisitive question that there's something going on beneath the surface. And that's a non-neurodiverse person. Everybody's experienced trauma. And if anybody walked out of this last year not having PTSD, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
What happened to you?
Yeah. So, and it changes the whole narrative, because instead of pointing a finger, what's wrong with you? It says, what happened to you?
Yes.
Tell me your story.
Yep.
What has created, again, going back to antecedents, what has created how you are being, how you are experiencing the world? And then I can have compassion. I can have understanding. I can look to see what behaviors or experiences might be able to be softened, released, minimized, while simultaneously, because you got to do both. Mm-hmm. You got to calm that nervous system. So you have to get rid of so much of that input. Now you can deal with the individual and teach them, okay, let's talk about how to regulate emotion. Let's talk about how to regulate input of energy, so that you're not, completely overwhelming yourself with other people's emotions and energies on top of the 5 senses that are coming through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that so much. And I love how you're really creating just a hierarchy of professionalism around understanding the energetic piece and really being able to walk into, you do a lot of work now with educators, also with parents. But, if we continue to ignore the energetic piece and the quantum aspect of what's going on, we're really missing the boat. And these kids, we have to learn as adults to not only co-regulate with our own energy, but also with children. I mean, I had a hypnotherapy client this last weekend who has rebouts of anxiety attacks, their panic attacks. And just walking with her, I always walk with my clients because I like them to continue to move that energy before I even get into the room with them, and just because when they walk, they sync, they're able to express that and keep things coming out. And as we were walking, I knew instantly this woman was so highly sensitive aware. And I could tell the way she was talking, and I got hits of intuition going back to her childhood. So I intuitively knew where to take the session. And I asked her, I said, do you have ADHD? And she said, no. Back to your point at the beginning of this session, but she is very, very highly sensitive. Mm-hmm. So the trauma piece is really, really big. As far as some of the other areas, we talked a little bit also about the hologram of the body, and how the hologram of the body actually stores energy inputs and memories from past memories, and it kind of stores in the body. So as adults, then we grow and we are maybe highly sensitive or empathic, but then we have those small traumas that, if we don't have really good boundaries or know how to work with our energy and our nervous system, then we will just continue to shut down. And the absolute worst thing with this, Judy, is that from a child and how we start shutting down the energy, especially if they're neurodiverse, we put them into an industrialized school system that says sit down, when that is the least thing that they can do and want to do experientially, how they learn, to an adult that then doesn't know how to manage their energy and just feels like a complete person with shame. I'm speaking with someone with ADHD, that I don't fit in this neurotypical world, because that's how we've industrialized our human infrastructure, to sit down, to go to work, to go home, to pay your taxes, that I've now regained my strength, I feel like, and all of my intuitiveness has come back when I actually reclaimed my ADHD, because I now know, oh my God, my brain runs so fast. That's why I'm intuitive, but I also have to learn how to manage my energy and get out of the shame, right? So how do you help kids with sensory overload, with ASD or autism or ADHD?
So I think the first step I try and do is help them to realize who they are and normalize the situation.
100%.
It's like you said, we have a society that's created still, unfortunately, and I attended so many awesome educators conferences, and yet still, we would go to these conferences and we would learn all these wonderful techniques about global learning and cooperative learning and all these incredible things. But shortly thereafter, you come back and then there are standardized tests and there are all these expectations, and pretty soon we're right back to a very similar, I don't even remember, what was it, 1940s, 1950s, everybody sitting in a row. It's not quite that bad anymore. Right now during COVID, probably, but otherwise not as bad. So we have evolved. I believe that humanity, people are evolving or changing. I don't know what kind of word we want to use for this, but our systems have not.
Right.
And so now we've got this disconnect. We've got all these wonderful kids who are coming into the world alert, aware, alive, very neuro-aware, and then they're placed into these systems that don't understand them, the parents, the educators, the educational system itself, all of these systems. So they feel like there's something wrong with them. So I first start off with, let's normalize who you are. Let's understand who you are. Let's normalize it. Let's look at the gifts that are part of it. And then I start talking about, what do you do when you're dealing with a lot of anxiety, when you're dealing with sensory overload? So, and how do you help the body? So there are a couple techniques that I like to teach. So a lot of people now are familiar with tapping, emotional freedom technique, or EFT. And one of the most fabulous websites around and app is by the Tapping Solution, thetappingsolution.com. And they have all these great, probably hundreds of scripts that they've created about all kinds of things. But really, I just teach, you don't need to know all of them. I'm going to back up so you can see a little bit more. So let's say I'm in a classroom or I'm in a meeting. I'm an adult in a meeting, or I'm in a classroom, or I'm talking to somebody at the dinner table and I'm feeling a lot of emotion. The big ones: anger, grief, sadness, frustration, whatever. And so I might be just kind of sitting here like this. I'm just relaxed. You take your two fingers, just right on the very edge, and you tap this bone right here at the top of your cheek. And I just look like I'm just kind of relaxing, and I'm just thinking, and I'm talking, and people don't pay attention to other people nearly as much as they pay attention to themselves.
Absolutely.
So this is one of the really huge thoughts right here. Then the other really good one, as you probably already know, is the collarbone. Again, I can just be sitting here and tapping. Sounds like I got some music going in my head. I'm really relaxed. I'm really not relaxed if I'm probably doing this, but I'm going to feel more relaxed. The edges of the hand. You can tap it with the opposite hand. You can put it down on your arm. You can put it on your thigh. And you can do it under the table or under the desk and nobody knows what you're doing. You can do it subtly. And these are the more hidden ways of tapping. You were talking earlier about walking with your clients. Excuse me while I roll here. Walking with your clients. Bessel van der Kolk at that first trauma conference taught motion moves emotions.
Yep.
How brilliant. So one of the silly things I do, I said, I bet you never heard this one before. I'll tell my hyperactive kids, look how intuitively brilliant you really are. You know your body has to shake. You know you need to flap. Exactly. You know you need to shake your leg because you're moving the energy, which helps move the emotions.
Exactly.
The same thing happens with the tapping.
Yep.
Another thing that I like to teach is we who are empaths. So sympathy, oh my goodness, that's so awful. What a shame. Empathy is, oh my goodness, that sounds so awful. I can imagine how hard that must have been for you. But an empath feels it in our own body. Sometimes we even feel the sensations of another, like physical discomfort. But most empaths only feel the emotions. So it starts off with, I've always been wired for anxiety. I've always been a very anxious person, way less so now because of the work I do and because of how much I understand. Um, but if I feel anxious, my first assumption is, oh my goodness, what's happened? What am I so anxious about? And I had an experience after learning this technique once. I was in the student-run restaurant at the high school where I used to work. And I had finished eating with my colleagues and I got up to pay the bill. And all of a sudden, I got this rush of anxiety. And I'm wondering, what is going on here? What is this about? I don't remember having any issues with any of my colleagues. I don't have any meetings or students coming up that I'm concerned about. What is going on here? But I kept thinking there must be something. And so I had learned this technique and I just asked these three simple words: is this mine?
Right.
And instantly I knew, no.
Yep.
A percentage is.
Right.
Otherwise, we wouldn't even note it.
Right.
But then, and I can't, there was no way of validating this one without looking like a complete goof and calling myself out, which I wasn't going to do. But the restaurant was also open to the community. And there was an older woman who was also standing in line. So when I got the "is this mine?" no, I kind of glanced around and thought, well, then where is it coming from? And I'm pretty sure it was coming from this older woman who was standing behind me. I did not turn to her and say, "Ma'am, are you having a rough day? It must be so difficult." I didn't go there, so I can't validate and verify it. So that's one thing is this mine? So we who are empaths, I'm going to back up again. We tend to take in all of this energy and emotions. And most people, I'll always ask, where do you feel it? And most people will tell me here in their abdomen, in their gut. A couple people have said here at their heart level. I've had a couple who said up here in their head. Who am I to say that they're wrong? It's not my experience, nor is it most of the people I talk to, but they feel it here. So I explain, as empaths, we bring it all in. And it's kind of like the blowhole on a dolphin or a whale. It opens when it comes out of the water to exhale and inhale. And when it goes back into the water, it closes down again. So we can start to recognize that we have this valve, so to speak, that we tend to have wide open. It's all coming rushing in because that's what we think we have to do. Nobody had this conversation with us. Nobody taught it to us when we were little kids. So, I didn't learn this till I was probably in my 40s, maybe older. So what I invite people is let's play. It's just, call it make-believe. It doesn't matter. Call it your imagination. It doesn't matter. Let's play. So I invite people to close their eyes. You who are listening can do this if you wish. And just imagine, where does it feel like your blowhole is set? And now play with it. What happens if you make it a little smaller? What happens if you open it back up again? How does it feel? Do you sense that difference? Where is a comfortable place? And that comfortable place might vary. If you're hanging out with your animals, your loved ones, and you really do love them and you're really comfortable and safe with them, then you can have it more open. If you're out in nature, on a raft, in a beautiful during a beautiful sunset, it's probably going to be more open. If you're with a lot of people or with challenging people, I invite you to make it smaller. I have not yet met anybody who feels comfortable closing it all the way closed. You find your space. Some people don't like to use the idea of the blowhole. It just doesn't resonate for them. You might try like a weave. Some people choose color. If I use a red, it's a very deep hue. If I use pink, it's more translucent. Play with the color. There was one woman, none of that resonated for her. And so I said, well, what makes sense to you? And she said, a firewall. I don't know from computers. That's not my second language or third language, but it was her first language. And it made perfect sense to her. She set her firewall. She could adjust it. She called me about a week or two later and she said, Judy, I'm feeling so much better, because what brought her to me was after days or weeks of work, she couldn't even get out of bed. She was so exhausted and sick. And then she'd muster up the courage to go back to work again. And she said, I'm not having that issue anymore.
Wow. That's amazing. That's really, really
So,
amazing.
yeah. And now I have a new tip, because I had met a couple of adults who kept saying to me, no, Judy, it is my job to take in other people's energy. And I'm like, no, it's not. We are not the shamans.
That's being a martyr. That's being a martyr.
Well, Cassandra, I'm not here to say that it's not true, because I don't know. I wasn't that person. I had a couple of adults and I kept fighting them on it. And then I had a little 7-year-old munchkin.
Oh.
And he used to come home from school exhausted and have meltdowns. And he and I chatted, and I explained to him about this.
Yep.
And he was like, interesting, but no. He said, Judy, it's my job. And I'm like, no, it's not your job. And I'm going back and forth with him. And he just looked at me so firm and he said, it's my job. So I'm like, okay. And I tapped into my intuitive source. And I heard, yes, it is. So then I was like, okay, well, now what do we do? And then I got the intuitive hit. All right, if it's your job, and I had this conversation with this little 7-year-old, if it's your job to bring in all of that information, all of that emotion, all of that energy to help the people around you, let's say for a moment it is. When it's there, along with all of the other sensory input that you get all day, your own emotions, is it helping? And he said, no. I said, did it ever occur to you that we should set a drain? And he's so cool. He just taps into his intuitive spot. He says, that makes sense. I said, shall we try that? Sure. And we played with that imagery. Where do you think you want to make your drain? Your drain could go up if you want. Your drain could go down. It could go out through your hip. And that solved that problem for a while.
I love that. I really, really, really love that. And, I think, again, it's using the field, it's using what feels right for us. And to really, again, go back to that co-regulation. What is it that you feel? Where do you feel it? And this goes back to the holographic body. And Brett Baum has done so much research in this area, but what you're saying is anecdotally true, in that we have the hologram of our body, and then we have the hologram of the universe. And this beautiful 7-year-old, and those of us that are more inquisitive to feeling it, is that we're not only bringing in the hologram of the universe, we're bringing in our own hologram of the close hologram. And then we have our own hologram that we're actually having to make sure, back to your question, is that mine? So is it hitting against something that isn't healed in me? Is it somebody else's energy? Or is it this global infrastructure? I mean, there'll be times I'll wake up with a little bit of anxiousness, and later I check in. I don't watch the news or anything. I check in with what's going on. It's like, bingo. Or I go search to what's going on, and bingo. Another piece to kind of tie into the firewall is that I love is that, I often have a conversation with children in a different way as to adults around consciousness. And I was sitting in a clubhouse room one day, and a very intuitive healer, he called me out, and he said, you're very, very empathic, but your empath is moving into empathy, back to what you were saying. And what he meant by that is that when you have empathy for people, you get really sloppy with your energy, where I want to kind of coordinate what you were sharing. And when I said martyr, is that there's a difference between philo, which in Hebrew and Greek is this lovey-lovey, kind of sloppy, just kind of energy, whereas agape is really standing in that high view place, being able to take in the inference of the energy, but be in a place that's separate from it, that does the best thing for that person, that has them detached from it has anything to do with the meaning of who you are, but it has their best interest in mind. So I just kind of, when you were talking, I'm like, man, the firewall is the critical factor filter in our brain, that when we let those memories in back to our memory status and our trauma, it goes and just attaches to a like-minded frequency, that then we go into rumination and anxiety and depressed, and we say, I'm anxious. Well, I'm not anxious. I just have a lot of ruminating thoughts that are bumping around in my energy that I can't sort out and slow down. So I just thought that was really interesting. And then we have to get back above that firewall. So we're really conscious and we're going about and we're hyper aware, but we're not back in our imagination, swimming in the emotions of our past memories and things that we haven't resolved. Does that make sense?
Totally. I love it. Yeah. And it reminds me, you were right when you said it is a martyr, because
can be.
Because that's why I started teaching this concept.
Right.
It's not, we have to have good boundaries. We who are empaths, we who are healers probably have the cruddiest boundaries of most people, because we think we're supposed to be all things for everybody and be available for everybody. And I don't know if that's a leftover overlay from we who may have all been shamans in other lifetimes.
You know what I think it is, Judy, is, going back to frequency, ADHD, autism, goes back to my correlation with my brain is really fast. I'm living 3 days ahead. I'm past the conversation. That's why ADHD individuals will say, can you please just go ahead and ask with your question first, or tell me the point that you want to dialogue about? Because as an ADHD individual, I already know what you're going to say, but then you're creating the dialogue and I just want to get to the point. It's not because I'm impatient. It's because my brain is too fast. And so I have to learn how to co-regulate with my body so that I can make sure that that person is heard and seen with my consciousness, not just a good eye contact, but I'm really, really, really present with them. That's why we can be ADHD or autistic, can be rude or blurt things. We really have to learn how to manage our energy. And this is why I go back to, is ADHD really a label? Because it's a way that you work within your systems and your brain that's based on the primitive nature of having a really hypersensitive nervous system. And anxiety and depression, of course, they're comorbidities. Because if it's not managed well, the cortical goes off the radar and you are really sloppy on your executive function. Why do we have 4 times more adults being diagnosed with ADHD today? It's an executive function disorder because we're anxious. We can't keep strain of our thoughts, and we've got a lot of stress. Our brains are on fire.
And we can't stay in our bodies. And, just kind of a little tease, because you and I had chatted after our last conversation that never got aired because it didn't work. But we realized that we have another similarity. And, just like sitting at Bessel van der Kolk's conference when he's talking about trauma from the big T perspective of trauma. And all of a sudden I went, oh, physiologically, that's what my kids and adults are doing. Same thing, different terminology, different but similar. And years before that, I was sitting at a conference with a psychic medium. And before he was doing his readings, he was teaching us about different things. I'm still not sure why. It doesn't matter. I remember sitting there and all of a sudden it was blank and I got another download and saw Maslow's hierarchy overlaying with the chakras and understanding how that has hindered and impacted autistics and other neurodiverse populations. And it was just another one of those, that makes sense. So the keys are helping people get in your body, have good boundaries, understand yourself, be in alignment with who you really are. And I know this is the work you do. When you're really ready for that level of transformation to really become aligned,
Amen, girl.
it's singing. It's just singing moments.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is why I'm so passionate about this subject of energy and really decoupling these labels of autism, ADHD. I mean, I look at any person as a beautiful person. And yes, we all have struggles. But again, it goes back to childhood environment. Was there trauma? Did you have an outlet then to heal that trauma? And I also don't subscribe to the self-development industry, because I certainly don't believe that we need to create a lifetime of trying to manage our ADHD or our autism with planners and schedulers and things that tell us to go and transition. Do they help? Yes. But I know living a life, and you could call masking my ADHD, I learned my frequency and my flow. So I know times during the day that I'm most regulated. I know I have to exercise to get otherwise I'll be anxious and I won't sleep. But this whole corollary with the chakra systems, and you and I are going to do a workshop on this,
Very excited.
Autism and ADHD. And to me, it's really also applicable to a neurotypical, because it's getting down to that sacral and root chakra. First and foremost, going back to what you said, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is safety. And if you can't create safety in your own body because you didn't have it as a child, oftentimes ADHD individuals have also a comorbidity of addictions, and you had a father who was an alcoholic or a mom that wasn't present because she was so anxious. That's an environment that didn't foster a healthy response in the nervous system, thank you, Gabor Mate, that now results in highly ADHD tendencies, which is basically a symptom of other things.
Touche.
I'm on a rant tonight. Okay. So I'm just saying, I do believe in autism and ADHD and the spectrum. And this is why I love what Ned Hollowell is doing, and that we can discuss here on this podcast, is he and I and you are on a mission to really bring this spectrum into a bigger picture of saying, we're also empathic. We're also really highly sensitive. We also are really, really innovative. And to really create this love around our complexities versus it being a negative thing, and really just learn how to manage ourselves so that we can live with purpose. And when you live with purpose, a lot of these things dissipate and you just own your beautifulness and you function in this world, ADHD or not. So, my dear, I want you to share what you're doing in this next phase of your work. I want to invite everybody to go to Judy's absolutely phenomenal website. You will find information there. When I started reading about quantum physics and energy, and I was like, oh, hello, woman. Tell us where we can find you and kind of what your next phase in your world is right now.
Okay. So my website is judylipson.com or spiralwisdom.com. Many ways to get to the same place. I have a monthly newsletter that comes out on the first of the month. As you said, my last month was devoted to big T, little t traumas. Usually it's more of a hodgepodge of all things that have to do with being sensitive, things that are good resources and techniques to know about autism, ADHD, and anxiety. When the pandemic started in, I guess it was just last year in 2020, I noticed a big shift come. There's still, everything is always about sensitives, but the title, the layout, everything changed. It's now the newsletter for transformation. And this month, which I just scheduled for August 1st, is going to be about grief and dying and death doulas and near-death experiences and things like that. And then September, it looks like it's going to be things that have to do with language, speech and language therapists. Hold on. So, because several things have dropped into my lap that have to do with language. So that's going to be the theme. Normally, it's more of a hodgepodge.
Love that.
Those are on the first. You can find the sign up for the newsletter on the homepage of the website, bottom right corner. If you're looking for the archives of the previous newsletters, that's on the top right. And then there's a link on the top of presentations and articles, and there's about 100 articles on there that have been written over, I don't know, 10 years. I'm not sure how many years I've been writing about school, education, parenting, and a lot more about metaphysics is starting to come through now.
Yeah.
That's because of my own personal journey. I'm doing way more with metaphysics and energy and intuition, light language, all kinds of things. Where am I moving? It's funny. It seems like my actual work is still one-on-one counseling, munchkins through senior adults, more and more, and any opportunity I can to teach all kinds of professionals, all kinds of adults, teens, parents, children, an opportunity like this. And more about transformation and about understanding the energy and the metaphysics, pushing the grid, pushing the envelope. It's real hard to submit proposals for the national conferences because they want the research, they want the peer-reviewed studies, and we're talking cutting-edge stuff here.
Right.
And I'm not a researcher. That's not my role here on Earth. My role is to be a translator, to be a communicator, and to help people to understand things differently, either about their loved ones, their students, their patients, themselves, and to help shift the curve.
Yeah, I think you're at, right time, right place. In business, we always talk about the hockey stick. And the hockey stick is when you've been mastering your art for so long, right? And then boom, you take off. So, I'm so thankful for you. I feel like,
Thank you.
You are my kindred sister.
I feel it.
Yeah. And I can't wait to do this chakra workshop with you. Now, fall is going to be busy, so we're definitely going to get it scheduled. We'll do its best. We both know that the energy will align when it's supposed to, just like we had time here tonight together. And I appreciate you so much for rescheduling and staying up late for me. But what you're doing is wonderful. I'm so glad that we could commune on this message around energetics, empath, sensitives, so people really can start to understand that, looking at someone with autism or ADHD, even in a corporate structure, can really start to tap into their own softness and just soften your view, right? And start to really think about what it's like to live in a body like that, because it can be really overwhelming. Right? So have empathy, no pun intended. Don't go into sympathy, because then you get sloppy on your energy. I appreciate you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Awaken Beauty podcast. And we can't wait to see you on the chakra workshop.
Thank
and
you, Cassandra.
Yes, thank you, sweetheart. I'll make sure I have the show notes. And until next time, stay sane, get sleep, and always bring your sexy back.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, hello, Awaken Beauty. Thank you so much for joining the show today. Were you inspired? Please leave a comment or your own personal aha moment so others can capture exactly what you did. Also, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you're interested in high quality natural products for your hair, skin, and wellness, including organic CBD, please visit evoquebeauty.com. Again, that is evoquebeauty.com, evoquebeauty.com. And until next time, darling, stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back.